Hello, reviewees! In our previous lessons, we have explored deductive and inductive reasoning, understanding how to draw conclusions from premises and make educated guesses based on observations. Today, let us dive into our exploration of identifying valid arguments. The four types of proposition: universal affirmative, universal negative, particular affirmative, and particular negative, are the premises and conclusion of an argument. An argument is valid if and only if it is necessary that if all of the premises are true, then the conclusion is true. If all the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. It is impossible that all the premises are true and the conclusion is false. However, not all combinations of such propositions are compatible with each other and therefore invalid. Thus, the validity of an argument depends on the logical consistency of the propositions it comprises, ensuring that the conclusion follows inevitably from the premises. Before we identify different valid arguments, we need first to recognize the different types of figure. In Figure 1, it represents a syllogism or a logical argument structure known as a sub-pre, in which the middle term connects the first premise, all Filipinos are brave, and the second premise, some Taclobanans are Filipinos, to reach a conclusion, some Taclobanans are brave. This example illustrates a valid categorical syllogism adhering to the rules of categorical logic. If the premises are true, the conclusion naturally follows, demonstrating the logical relationship between the statements. In this case, it concludes that if some Taclobanons are Filipinos and all Filipinos are brave, then it logically follows that some Taclobanans must be brave as well. The Figure 2 depicts a syllogism structure known as pre-pre, where the middle term connects the two premises and leads to a conclusion. In the given example, it is stated that all human beings are creatures of God and no animals are creatures of God. This syllogism follows the rules of categorical logic and results in the conclusion that no human beings are animals. It showcases a valid logical relationship between the premises and the conclusion. If we accept the truth of the premises, the conclusion logically follows, illustrating that in this context, there is no overlap between human beings and animals in terms of being creatures of God. In Figure 3, it represents a sub-sub syllogism, wherein the middle term connects both premises to reach a conclusion. In the given example, it is stated that all Catholics are Christians and all Catholics are believers in God. This syllogism follows the principle of categorical logic and results in the conclusion that some believers in God are Catholics. It demonstrates a valid logical relationship, emphasizing that if all Catholics share the attributes of being Christians and believers in God, then there must be a subset of believers in God who are Catholics. This logical structure helps clarify the relationship between these categories. The Figure 4 illustrates a pre-sub syllogism, in which the middle term is the connecting link between the two premises, leading to a conclusion. In the example given, it is asserted that all law enforcers are police, and police are loyal persons. This syllogism adheres to the rules of categorical logic and logically concludes that some loyal persons are law enforcers. It demonstrates a valid logical relationship, indicating that if all police officers possess the trait of being loyal, then there must be a subset of loyal persons within the category of law enforcers. So this logical structure showcases the connection between these categories. So here are the following valid arguments under each figure. Let us discuss first the valid arguments under the sub-pre. First, the Barbara. The statement provided follows the sub-pre syllogism format with three universal affirmative propositions. It begins by asserting that all workers are hardworking, followed by the claim that all job orders are workers. However, the conclusion that all hard workers are job orders doesn't logically follow from the given premises. In categorical logic, the conclusion should be, therefore, all job orders are hard working. As this conclusion aligns with the premises and the logical relationship between the categories. The initial conclusion is not supported by the premises and represents an incorrect application of categorical syllogism rules. The statement follows the Celarent syllogism, a valid form of categorical reasoning. It begins by making the universal negative claim that no mammals have wings, and then it states that all dogs are mammals, which is a universal affirmative proposition. The logical conclusion, therefore no dogs have wings, is a valid deduction following the premises. This syllogism adheres to the principles of categorical logic, demonstrating that if no mammals have wings and all dogs are mammals, then it logically follows that no dogs have wings. The statement follows the Derive syllogism, which is a valid form of categorical reasoning. It starts with a universal affirmative premise that all politicians are corrupt. Then, it introduces the particular affirmative premise stating that some lawyers are politicians. The logical conclusion, therefore, some lawyers are corrupt, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism adheres to the principles of categorical logic, showing that if all politicians are considered corrupt and some lawyers are politicians, it logically follows that there must be a subset of lawyers who are also corrupt in line with the given premises. The next statement conforms to the fair use syllogism, which is a valid form of categorical reasoning. It commences with the universal negative premise that no wealthy people are benevolent. Subsequently, it introduces the particular affirmative premise claiming that some businessmen are wealthy. The logical conclusion, therefore some businessmen are benevolent, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism aligns with the principles of categorical logic, indicating that if no wealthy people are considered benevolent and some businessmen are wealthy, there must be a subset of businessmen who are also benevolent, as implied by the premises. Next are the valid arguments under Pre-Pre. The statement follows the Pre-Pre syllogism of Cesare, which is a valid form of categorical reasoning. It begins with a universal negative premise that no companies are experiencing an economic crisis. Then, it introduces the universal affirmative premise asserting that all poor provinces are experiencing an economic crisis. The logical conclusion, therefore, no poor provinces are companies, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism adheres to the principles of categorical logic, demonstrating that if no companies are experiencing an economic crisis and all poor provinces are, then it logically follows that there must be no overlap between poor provinces and companies as suggested by the premises. The statement conforms to the Keimster's syllogism, is a valid form of categorical reasoning. It commences with the universal affirmative premise that all human beings are rational. Following this, it presents the universal negative premise stating that no animals are rational. The logical conclusion, therefore no animals are human beings, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism aligns with the principles of categorical logic, indicating that if all human beings are rational and no animals are rational, it logically follows that there is no overlap between animals and human beings as implied by the premises. Festino's syllogism is a valid form of categorical reasoning. It begins with the universal negative premise that no workers are decisive. It then introduces the particular affirmative premise stating that some teachers are decisive. The logical conclusion, therefore, some teachers are not workers, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism adheres to the principles of categorical logic, demonstrating that if no workers are considered decisive and some teachers are decisive, it logically follows that there must be a subset of teachers who are not workers, as indicated by the premises. The statement conforms to the Barroco syllogism. It is a form of valid categorical reasoning. It starts with the universal affirmative premise that all prisoners are deviant. Subsequently, it presents two particular negative premises, asserting that some poor people are deviant, and consequently concluding that some poor people are prisoners. This syllogism aligns with the principles of categorical logic, demonstrating that if all prisoners are considered deviant, and there exists an overlapping subset of poor people who are also deviant, it logically follows that some of these poor people can be classified as prisoners, as implied by the premises. Here are the following valid arguments under sub-sub. The statement adheres to the de Rupt syllogism, a valid form of categorical reasoning. It begins with two universal affirmative premises stating that all dogs are both cold-blooded and sentient. The logical conclusion, therefore, some sentient are cold-blooded, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism aligns with the principles of categorical logic, demonstrating that if all dogs possess the traits of being cold-blooded and sentient, there must exist a subset of sentient who are also cold-blooded, as suggested by the premises. The statement conforms to the Desarmes syllogism, which is a valid form of categorical reasoning. It starts with a particular affirmative premise stating that some NPAs or New People's Army are rebels. Following this, it introduces the universal affirmative premise asserting that all NPAs are armed men. The logical conclusion, therefore, some armed men are rebels, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism adheres to the principles of categorical logic, showing that if some NPAs are rebels and all NPAs are armed men, it logically follows that there must be a subset of armed men who are also rebels, as implied by the premises. Philapton. It is a valid form of categorical reasoning. It commences with the universal negative premise that no prisoners are generous. It then introduces the universal affirmative premise stating that all prisoners are deviant. The logical conclusion, therefore some deviant persons are not generous, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism adheres to the principle of categorical logic, demonstrating that if no prisoners are considered generous and all prisoners are deviant, it logically follows that there must be a subset of deviant individuals who are not generous, as implied by the premises. The statement follows the Bocardo syllogism, a valid form of categorical reasoning. It starts with a particular negative premise asserting that some workers are teenagers. Following this, it introduces the universal affirmative premise stating that all workers are hard-working. The logical conclusion, therefore, some who are hardworking are teenagers, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism adheres to the principles of categorical logic, showing that if there are some workers who are teenagers and all workers are hard-working, then there must exist a subset of hard-working individuals who are teenagers, as suggested by the premises. And here are the valid arguments under presub. The statement adheres to the presub syllogism, the Birmantep, and the valid form of categorical reasoning. It begins with two universal affirmative premises, stating that all forms of sexual harassment are violent crimes, and all violent crimes are against the law. The logical conclusion, therefore, something against the law is sexual harassment, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism aligns with the principles of categorical logic, demonstrating that if all sexual harassment constitutes violent crimes, and all violent crimes are against the law, then there must be instances that are both against the law and involve sexual harassment as implied by the premises. The statement follows the Kamins syllogism, a valid form of categorical reasoning. It commences with a universal affirmative premises, asserting that all plants are static beings. It is followed by a universal negative premise, stating that no static beings are dynamic beings. The logical conclusion, therefore, no dynamic beings are plants, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism adheres to the principles of categorical logic, demonstrating that if all plants are static beings and no static beings are dynamic beings, there can be no overlap between dynamic beings and plants as suggested by the premises. The statement adheres to the Fisapol syllogism, a valid form of categorical reasoning. It commences with a universal negative premise, asserting that no animals are wild beasts. It is followed by a universal affirmative premise, stating that all wild beasts are lions. The logical conclusion, therefore, some lions are not animals, is a valid deduction based on the premises. This syllogism aligns with the principles of categorical logic, demonstrating that if no animals are wild beasts and all wild beasts are lions, there must be a subset of lions that are not considered animals as implied by the premises. The statement adheres to the Fresiso syllogism, a valid form of categorical reasoning. It starts with a universal negative premise, asserting that no soldiers are heroes. Following this, it introduces the particular affirmative premise, stating that some heroes are Filipinos. The logical conclusion, therefore, some Filipinos are not soldiers, is a valid deduction based on the premises. The syllogism aligns with the principles of categorical logic, demonstrating that if no soldiers are considered heroes, and some heroes are Filipinos, there must be a subset of Filipinos who are not soldiers, as implied by the premises. And that brings us to the end of our discussion on identifying valid arguments. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson as we continue our journey through the fascinating realm of logic and critical thinking.